Production and distribution of City Club Forums on IdeaStream is made possible by the generous support of PNC and the Raskin Family Fund, with additional funding from Cleveland State University, Robert Conrad, and the Payne Fund.
Good afternoon and welcome to the City Club of Cleveland. I'm Jose Feliciano Jr., President Emeritus of the Young Latino Network, a proud member of the Board of Directors of the Hispanic Roundtable and of the City Club of Cleveland. It's my pleasure to introduce you to today's speaker, the Executive Director of the LIBRE Initiative, Daniel G. Garza. Today, according to the Center for Immigration Studies, the United States is home to more than 61 million immigrants, approximately 11 million of which are here undocumented. Immigrants comprise 18.9% of our nation's total population, the highest level in more than a century. And this increase is projected to continue. A Pew Research study found that nearly 59 million immigrants have arrived in the United States in the past 50 years, mostly from Latin America and Asia. Today, a near record 14% of the country's population is foreign-born, as compared with just 5% in 1965. Throughout the last 20 years, there have been numerous calls to fix our broken immigration system. Since 1996, the United States has tried and failed 4 times to pass federal immigration reform. The most recent of these efforts was the Comprehensive Immigration Reform Act of 2010. A recent study by the Chicago Council on World Affairs concluded that the Midwest, especially states such as Ohio, need immigrants for economic and demographic reasons, for congressional allocation and related appropriations at the top, middle, and bottom of the economic and social ladders. Immigration may be the political issue of this generation. It is clear that the current presidential race underscores that point. It is in this context that Mr. Garza joins us today. Daniel Garza began his career in public service as a congressional staff assistant for the United States Congressman Richard Doc Hastings, and in 1996 was elected as a councilman for the city of Toppenish, Washington. In 2001, he was tapped by the George W. Bush administration to serve as Deputy Director of External and Intergovernmental Affairs in the Office of the Secretary at the Department of Interior, and was appointed in 2004 to the Associate Director of the Office of Public Liaison in the White House. In 2006, Mr. Garza became president of Televisa's Hispanic Poder Group, overseeing editorial, commercial, and promotion of publications, and shortly thereafter joined Univision to host and co-produce Agenda Washington, a weekly Spanish language news talk show covering the issues impacting the United States Hispanic community. He joined the LIBRE Initiative in 2011. Born in the Central Valley of California, Mr. Garza annually migrated with his family from their ancestral hometown of Garza Gonzalez in Nuevo Leon, Mexico, throughout California, Nebraska, and Washington State following the crop season as farm workers. His firsthand knowledge of the plight of the immigrant community has earned him a reputation for advocating on behalf of Latinos for sound public policy, recognizing that the current status of our economy requires that it's vital this community play an essential role in bringing about solutions. Ladies and gentlemen, members and friends of the City Club of Cleveland, please welcome Mr. Daniel G. Garza. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that warm welcome, Jose. Thank you for those kind introduction. And Dan, also, thanks for being such a gracious host. It truly is an honor and a privilege to be in front of you today here at the Cleveland City Club. There has been, in the arc of history, such a distinguished list of speakers here. And to be added to that list is humbling. And that you would consider my consideration on the issue of immigration today. It really is. I just feel humbled, and thank you so much for that. I want to give a little bit of a insight to the plight of the immigrant, the conditions that are also paralyzing immigration reform, and then also talk about the benefits, the economic benefits of immigration reform and the urgency to get to the business of immigration reform. I want to do that through some visuals. So those who are on radio, who are probably listening, will not be able to see the visual part that has some music to complement it. But just know that it is goes in line with my remarks. So if we could begin the presentation, please. Thank you. The great highways streamed with moving people. The camps along the road, the fear of hunger and hunger itself changed them. The children without dinner changed them, and the hostility changed them, welded them, united them. Men of property were terrified for their property. On the highways, the people moved like ants in search for work, for food. Words from the book, The Grapes of Wrath, written by John Steinbeck about the massive migration of those fleeing the Great Dust Bowl of the late 1930s from Oklahoma to California. In uncompromising and somber prose, Steinbeck wrote about the individual's motivations to migrate for work, for opportunity, for a shot at improving one's lot in life and their families. Despite the challenges, hundreds of thousands of migrants from Oklahoma went from job holders to becoming job creators, and many would go on to accumulate unimaginable wealth. And the truth is, man has always been in motion, always will be in motion. Indeed, waves of migrations permeate America's history, and so do waves of immigration. My story begins in 1942, a time when labor to work the orchards and the fields was needed in America. As millions of our soldiers fought to defeat the fascist powers of Europe, we looked to Mexico, to Mexicans like my grandfather, who were asked to leave their families and hometowns to fill the need as braceros. As our GIs were winning battles in the Pacific, European, and North African theaters, laborers came in droves to harvest the bounty of our farms and orchards. Laborers with diligent hands, hands to plant seeds, to cultivate the fields, irrigate saplings, who made sure fruit trees were pruned and blossoms were thinned, that trees were kept warm from the cold and vegetables were fumigated, picked, sorted, packed, stacked, and transported to market to our soldiers abroad. This and other waves of immigrant laborers who would continue to flow across the US-Mexico border after the war had ended set the foundation for the rich American agricultural industry. All the while, the treatment many received was not the treatment they deserved. And as Pauline Kibbe of the University of New Mexico Press wrote in 1948, generally speaking, the Latin American migratory worker is regarded as a necessary evil. Nothing more nor less than an unavoidable adjunct to the harvest season. And when the crop has been harvested, vanishes into the limbo of forgotten things until the next harvest season rolls around. He has no past, no future, only a brief and anonymous present. This was the life of our family, moving along the highways through the states of California, Nebraska, and Washington State following the crop seasons. I couldn't tell you how many school days I missed and the slights, the indignations that we had to put up with. I saw my father get fired one day. The old man asked the owner of a hop farm for a small raise. The raise wasn't for him, you have to understand. It was for the field crew who had asked him to approach the farm owner because Dad, you see, spoke English. But rabble-rousers like him, well, they had to be put in their place. And that's the thing about the private sector sometimes. It can kick you in the teeth. The free market system is the best economic system in the world. But there is the question of supply and demand. There were the dozens I saw get disappeared by Border Patrol sweeps in the orchards, deported away to where they came from, many referred to as illegals, a term I believe strips away their humanity or any notion that they belong, rendering them as lesser than ourselves. It spares the person from having to consider their dreams and aspirations as equal to our own. You see, if they were equal, that is, it would make all the difference. Today, 2 million migrant laborers labor in our orchards and fields alone. When you count those who work tarring hot roofs, taking care of the old, washing dishes in the humid back rooms of restaurants and hotels, and mow our lawns, it goes up to millions more. Millions who we casually dismiss. So men of standing do not want to share their standing. Men of citizenship do not want to share their citizenship. It is a way of life that takes its toll. It takes tremendous resiliency not to grow up resentful and indignant at those who have everything, those who get the breaks, especially for the children. It takes everything you have not to get jaded or give up, but it happens. I recall on one occasion a fellow worker walked over to my father, said he had decided he would be moving back to Mexico after 5 years of hard living in the United States. Overworked, poorly paid, unappreciated, and tired of living in the shadows. He said he had had enough. My dad placed his hand on his shoulder, held it there for some time, and wished him well. He was gone by the end of that week, never to be seen again. I suppose it's what some would call self-deportation. I wasn't faring out too well either. By 1985, despite receiving summer school courses and night school classes, years of missed school days due to farm working demands had caught up to me. And at the age of 17, I was a high school dropout with no prospects for a meaningful career. But I didn't want to be yet another minority kid bowing down to the low expectations that so many well-intended liberals have for us, that I would eventually need government to provide me the subsistent living that I was entitled to, quote unquote. You see, I knew I had something else going for me. I was born in America to parents who passed on their strong Christian values and a belief that if you get educated and you work hard, put away savings and take a shot, the American dream was for anyone, even if you have nothing. And I remember the countless times my father and mother would close the door to their room and spend hours on their knees praying to the Lord. The hours my mother would spend reading us Bible scriptures out loud despite their 4th grade education. They showed remarkable wisdom. Dad would tell me nobody owed me a thing, that the noble thing to do was to make the right choices, even though they were the hard choices, that I would never feel complete and would always look at others who had achieved prosperity with envy and as oppressors. If I coveted what they had, do not covet, son. Always earn your bread by the talents God gave you. The Bible says, he quoted, "Remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you the ability to produce wealth." Indeed, God had another plan in my life, but it would take years to reveal what the days never could. In the fall of '87, Dad had determined to leave the fields for good and take a shot at entrepreneurship, at a small business. And after 30 years of farm work, he had no retirement, no health plan, no vacation or sick leave days accrued. Quietly and without fanfare, we got in our car after filling the last bin of apples and just simply moved on. My parents invested their entire savings in a small business, a 16-unit motel just off the freeway in the small northwest town of Toppenish, Washington. After spending borrowed money on renovation and marketing, the profits soon poured in. And after years of sacrifices, things were falling into place. I pursued a GED, my shot at a second chance. Little did I know it would set in motion a series of decisions that led to a job I never could have dreamed of because I never thought it was possible. I was appointed by President George W. Bush as his Associate Director of the Office of Public Liaison at the White House to be his representative to 55 million Latinos in America. My life experiences had proved essential when deliberating policy positions that were discussed at the policy table. In a classic case in which God uses the weak to confound the wise, I learned how each one of us brings a different kind of value to the table, a comparative advantage, if you will. No matter who you are, your experiences and sensibilities offer a perspective and a value that nobody else can bring. You see, what I had felt was my weakness growing up a farm worker, or that part of my life which made me feel like I didn't deserve to be there, was actually my strength. When talking about poverty issues, immigration and border issues, when discussing migrant education or trade with Central American and Latin American countries, few at the White House could speak to these issues with the same personal experience and knowledge that I had. I had gone from being a high school dropout at 17, working in the orchards and fields, to working for the President of the United States at the White House 17 years later. And here it is, really, which strikes me most about this exceptional country. My parents with their 4th grade education, my uncles, my cousins and friends who also migrated to America, who all started out as farm laborers, left the fields long ago. They moved on to become professionals, middle-class Americans living in urban and metro areas. Their children have become lawyers, doctors, engineers, computer programmers, good high-paying jobs. All of them overcoming their own obstacles like millions of immigrants before them and those who came after. 200 million immigrants have come to America to achieve their dream, their aspirations, not the aspirations of a politician, their own aspirations. And by doing that, they have generated immense wealth for America. My family now is part of the 1% most wealthiest people in the world. My aunts and uncles are part of the 1% most wealthiest people in the world. And in fact, if you make $36,000 a year after taxes, you are also part of the 1% most wealthiest people in the world, according to the World Bank. But here's the thing about America and the American dream. Half of the world's 1% reside here in America. Think about that. That is the wealth that is generated by our free market system. 86% of America's millionaires are self-made. Did not inherit wealth. They made it through hard work and perseverance, overcoming their own barriers, their own obstacles. Maybe not like the ones I had to face, but that is a testament to this country, that folks who come with a 4th grade education can achieve their dreams. And this country has allowed for more dreams to be realized than any country in the history of the world. Today, there are 15 million Latinos who make over $50,000 a year. That is more wealth than any other Hispanic nation in the world. Thank you, free markets. America is 5% of the world's population, but has 1/3 of the world's millionaires. Think about that. At the LIBRE initiative, our work focuses on resisting excessive taxation, burdensome regulations, and runaway spending. We believe freedom drives progress and upholds the dignity of the individual. Progress that anyone can achieve, regardless of color, creed, faith, or education. And yes, there will come obstacles. Yes, the free market will kick you in the teeth. But the options that you have are immense. Freedom allows us to be complete, to find our calling. And it is through primarily through the sufficiency and the accumulation of capital, as we were discussing, that you can then advance and pursue charitable, evangelistic pursuits, ministerial pursuits, personal pursuits. Without capital, there's not much you can do. I don't care what the people say about, folks who have made it in America did it on the backs of the poor or because of greed. They offered a product and a service that met consumer demand and made life better for people. That is why they're successful. And instead of increasing programs that call for redistribution of earned wealth that is being promoted, we should call for redistribution of knowledge and opportunity. That is what is going to make us or continue a strong America. It is a policy option that if we call for more redistribution and public welfare programs, that is unsustainable, that does not generate wealth, that keeps people living at a level of mediocrity, of subsistence. It is a policy option that is unsustainable, moves us away from rewarding hard work, self-reliance, and fiscal responsibility. And when it comes to public assistance programs, let me just say quickly, it is not the wasted money that should worry us, it's the wasted lives. And I mentioned this in an immigration context because immigrants don't come to get on welfare, they come to work hard. I saw that in my parents, and I see that in the current generation of immigrants. We must all work together in our community, taking action on key issues that will enable the economic freedom necessary to making the American dream possible for millions, as we have done so throughout our history. This is only possible if we respond to market forces and immigration flows with deliberate and effective policies. That means encouraging investments in private enterprises, incentivizing small and large businesses to expand, to buy new equipment and hire more employees by advancing policies that honor America's free market system. In short, we need more freedom, not less. We need less government, not more. And lastly, I believe the best path forward to reform the broken immigration system in the United States is through a streamlined, market-based and employment-driven policy. The ongoing failure of Washington to develop and approve a sound immigration policy threatens our national security, our economic prosperity, and the cohesion of the family unit. So long as as the American economy is strong, immigrants will look to the United States as the beacon of hope for a better future. Currently, we have a highly restrictive immigration law, a system that criminalizes most activity of selling one's labor, and we have criminalized the market-driven activity of buying labor to make a profit, whether basic or specialized. This is a tragedy. In the 1920s, we passed a law. It was prohibition. And prohibition said that it is illegal to produce, distribute, and consume alcohol in America. And for want of a beer, millions of America violated American law or federal law, committed felony for want of a beer. Were they bad people? Maybe some of them were. It was a bad law. Today, for want of opportunity, people point to the immigrants and say, look at them, illegals, violating the law, seeking opportunity to sell their labor for someone who wants to buy their labor to make a profit. Are they bad people? Some of them are. Cartels and, gang members. It's a bad law that we have. We have a broken law that does not accommodate for market forces. We have criminalized the very rational activity of someone wanting to sell their labor. America needs immigration reform that is focused on providing immigrants that are willing to work in the United States the ability to legally enter the country through a streamlined, common sense process that allows American employers to satisfy workforce demands in their markets. Did you know that almost 80% of full-time graduate students in electrical engineering in the United States are international students? In computer science, foreign nationals make up more than 70% of graduate students. 28.5% of new entrepreneurs in 2014 were immigrants, which is up from 13.3% in 1997. Today, immigrants are almost twice as likely to start a business in 2016 as native-born Americans. The nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office found that immigration reform would increase GDP by between 0.8% and 1.3% from 2012 to 2016 had we passed the law. And according to the National Survey of College Graduates, immigrants represent slightly under 14% of the resident working population holding a bachelor's degree or higher. But among this group, they represent 29% of scientists. They also represent 50% of PhDs working in math and computer science occupations, and 57% of PhDs working in engineering occupations. Specialized. The economics are simple. If you are worried that immigrants drive wages down or are hurting taxpayers, as some opponents of immigration reform are worried about, the status quo is your enemy. It leaves millions without legal protection from labor exploitation. It also restricts economic mobility and access to credit. It makes investing in personal capital, education, skills risky, very risky, and investing in a home or business even more so. So they don't. That's not good for our economy. They are being driven into the shadows in more of a underground black market economy. If we would bring them out of the shadows, they would contribute directly to the economy. There exist more jobs in a 20-person economy as compared to a 10-person economy. Why? Because more people demanding goods and services means that more people must work to satisfy this demand. Thus, the law of supply and demand is born. It brings with it an important implication that the number of jobs in a given economy is never fixed. People's wants and needs are constantly evolving. Suppliers must keep pace to meet this demand. Therefore, when foreign immigrants become American consumers, employers respond by hiring more people. So why can't we agree? Players on both sides of the political divide are making consensus and reconciliation of differences nearly impossible. Polarization, partisanship, and demonization has become a pernicious and counterproductive cancer in our body politic. It is especially destructive when politicians turn their venom onto hardworking, otherwise law-abiding, good and decent immigrants struggling for opportunity. If we allow this narrative to continue, if we don't remind Americans of the contributions of immigrants and how immigrants have helped in making America strong and prosperous, we will continue this worsening of a two-tiered society we have been trying to change instead of making further progress. And we drive people further into the shadows by doing this. Let me also be quick to add, it is I think, venomous when pro-immigration activists burn bridges when they offer up counterproductive rhetoric against individual elected leadership who are needed to get behind any reform. Instead of finding space for agreement, they further the divide by projecting hate and division. Public policy should be about allowing people to thrive and prosper, not destroy opportunity and human dignity. And I think everybody is hard at work to make America stronger. And sometimes the rhetoric that is used around the issue of immigration on both sides is counterproductive. We should not fear waves of poor immigrants. We were built by waves of poor immigrants. America was made strong and powerful. America was made strong and powerful as a result of the waves of poor immigrants that have crossed our borders since our founding. What we should fear is an economic system that hinders opportunity, that stifles innovation. We should fear the death of the American free market system, because then we would not be able to absorb new waves of immigrants who are allowed to create their own American dream by generating their own wealth and passing on the American dream to others. I'll end with this. Spanish philosopher Jose Ortega y Gasset insightfully said, "It is the man of excellence and not the common man who lives in essential servitude." Let us strive to serve our fellow man, our communities, and our country. The kind of world we create is a product of the kind of people we become and we remain. This is a world in desperate need of compassion, of kindness and respect. It is a world in need of God's grace, of freedom, and the kind of dignity that comes from earned success. Let us work together to make it happen. Thank you very much.
Today we are enjoying a Friday Forum featuring Daniel Garza, Executive Director of the LIBRE Initiative. We're about to head into the question and answer portion of this luncheon. We welcome questions from everyone, City Club members, guests, students, or those of you joining us via radio broadcast, webcast, or our new live simulcast at the Parma Snow branch of the Cuyahoga County Public Library. If you'd like to tweet a question, please tweet it to @TheCityClub, and our staff will try to work it into the program. Holding the microphones today are Content Associate Teddy Eisenberg and Director of Programming Stephanie Jansky. May we have the first question, please?
Yes, sir. Do you favor the English-only movement to put a constitutional amendment in to make English the language of America?
So I favor knowledge. And any way we can communicate knowledge is what I'm in favor of. And whether that's in Spanish or English. Now, there's no question that English is the language of success. Latinos understand that better than anybody else. Immigrants understand that better than anybody else. And in fact, at the LIBRE Initiative, we are very much involved in offering English classes. And we get 500 people at a time who attend these workshops. There is a desperate need by the immigrant community to learn English as quick as possible. In fact, according to NALEO, the National Association of Latino Elected Officials, when an immigrant learns English, it will quadruple their salary. So that's a no-brainer, that we desire English as a community, to learn it as quickly as possible. In fact, my parents learned English from us, from my brother and I, as quickly as they could. So I am not for any effort that restricts knowledge. But I am for, obviously, a common language, but not requiring it through government coercion.
Mr. Garza, thank you so much for sharing your story with us, and thank you for making the economic argument for immigration. So as you've described, on the policy side, we're at loggerheads, and 4 attempts were gotten nowhere. So you've talked about changing the narrative on immigration. My question to you is, where would you focus your efforts first to start moving the needle on the narrative about immigration? Thank you.
On both sides. Look, I am concerned for the prospects of permanent, sensible, bipartisan immigration reform when I hear both sides speak. And let me explain why. On the one hand, the Republicans, because some individuals within the party, not all, because there is, I think, a lot of promotion of immigration reform within the party. I see it myself. There are a lot of individuals at the top of leadership, who want to advance immigration reform. But then, of course, there are, the minority faction that have taken harsh positions and have expressed harsh rhetoric on immigration reform and immigrants that is not helpful to the cause. The current candidate, who is now the presumed nominee, has taken a very harsh position. We put a public statement out that we did not agree or align anywhere close to his expressed policy positions. We feel that it's unproductive to try to intercept the remittances of hardworking immigrants who want to send their money back to their mothers and grandmothers and their children. I don't know how you do that. It would take massive government coercion to do that, and so I would resist that. The fact that obviously we want to deport all 11 million, it would require a mobilization of massive resources of the government and create a police state. And then the wall, look, there are just areas across the border that you cannot build a wall on. And animals do not know what borders are. They need to migrate. And so we have to build car barriers, and it's not always a wall. I live in Mission, Texas, blocks away from Ansaldua's bridge where the surge happened, the kids. There's a wall that is 25 feet high, and there's a 10-mile stretch from Las Peñitas to La Jolla. And I was talking to a friend of mine who was a border agent, and I asked him, just tell me straight up, what's going on over there? How many people get through? He says, Daniel, I would never confess this in public. I'll never mention him, his name, but he said, we did an assessment for a month, how many folks were getting through. When the shift change happened through infrared cameras, when somebody caught somebody and then they left that gap open or whatever. The point is this, in a 10-mile stretch of a 25-foot wall, 1,000 people were getting through a day. That's 30,000 people a month. We have a 1,300-mile border. The border stretches from Texas, the tip of Texas, to Chicago, if you actually straighten it out. We have a massive border. So it's not a simple solution to build a wall. Anyway, the point is, there's a lot of rhetoric, right, that is non-productive. On the other side, the other presumed nominee is making promises that she knows she cannot, I said she, well, that she knows she cannot deliver on. Democrats do not get to define what immigration reform is. Democrats do not pass immigration reform. Neither do Republicans. They both do. A president does not legislate. A president executes law. It's the Congress that legislates. And you have to reach consensus with Congress. And if you're going to stake a position that goes against the majority will of Congress, it's never going to happen, and President Barack Obama can tell you that. So at some point, the Democrats are going to have to move from their fixed position and reconcile their differences with a Republican-led Senate and a Republican-led House and come to an agreement. That means you have to give, and the Republicans have to give. And it doesn't seem like anybody's willing to do that. In fact, Hillary Clinton has said that she's going to go beyond Barack Obama on executive action. Executive action is being held up in the courts. Donald Trump has said they have to go, referring to the DACA kids after he gets the presidency. So executive action is only temporary and partial. So yes, I'm concerned by both sides. The fact is we need consensus. We need pragmatic leaders who can come together and do what's right for our economy, for our societies, and for the cohesion of families. We're ripping families apart. That should worry every one of us. There are 11 million folks who are here currently without authorization. Of the 11 million, 8 million are working hard and contributing to this economy. Why do we criminalize that? We should allow people and American employers to respond to market forces the best way they see fit. And so that's why we believe in a market-based system that accommodates for that. So I would hope that, again, the both sides would come together, reach consensus, stop trying to score cheap political points at the expense of the immigrant community and really the Latino community.
First of all, I need to state that I am not anti-immigration, but I do believe that there is serious need for discretionary reform with immigration. My question is in this form. What type of immigration reform could you recommend that would protect, particularly professionals in the healthcare system who happen to be people of color, from being passed over for jobs for which they have credentials and qualifications, but are being passed over for people from foreign countries?
So for us, more freedom means more autonomy to the individual. More freedom doesn't mean a bigger government. It works the other way around. We don't want to see power being centralized in Washington, D.C., decision-making power being centralized. I'm prefacing my remarks to answer your question. More capital and power being centralized in Washington, D.C. doesn't give us individual freedom. Individual freedom is when we have less government. Now, what do I mean by that? How do we pass an immigration reform that preserves individual freedom also to the immigrant? If you hear Republicans talking, what they're saying is that they want a work visa program that'll legalize, not put them on a path to citizenship, but legalize the 11 million so they can get onto the business of having the certainty that they will not be deported and contributing as employees, to willing employers. Part of the problem with that is that it ties the immigrant to an employer. And the resistance from the Democrats is that they want a path to citizenship. That is their fixed position, and they won't move from that. And part of the reason, and I know I'm being very cynical, I've been at this for a while, is because 70% of Latinos vote Democrat. It's in their political interest to give them citizenship. And if you're a Republican, it is not in your political interest to give citizenship to Latinos. But it is in your personal interest to make sure that we are able to respond to market forces and have a labor workforce that can give them profit, right? So how do you reconcile the differences? Because I can promise you, if 70% of Latinos were voting for Republicans, you'd have the Democrats on this side talking about work visa programs. For us, ideally, a path to citizenship would be the optimum policy for us. Because you generate, you bring people out of the shadows and they contribute to the economy and they generate new wealth and new opportunities and more consumers are created, like I was saying. And it's not a fixed, a number of jobs. We actually can generate more jobs when people are freer to commerce and trade and do what they do, which is innovate and create products and services for ourselves. Now, but we have a political limitation to a path to citizenship, apparently. So then the question becomes a more pragmatic question. Well, if we can't get a path to citizenship, what would be the next best thing that we would find acceptable, given our desire for individual autonomy, individual freedom, less decision-making powers and being centralized in Washington, D.C. For us, a work visa program would have to include several things as part of, for us to find it acceptable. One is that it incorporates job mobility, the freedom to that if you're fired, you have time to find another job. The ability to be promoted. The ability to actually get another job if it pays better. That you're not tied to one employer, but you are tied to employment. That's perfectly acceptable to us. That it have that it have circularity. Circularity means the person who's been granted the visa can go to and from their country of origin or anywhere that they please for whatever reason, whether it's a quinceañera, a soccer game, a funeral, a wedding, or because they want to. Job mobility and circularity are critical. Also, family unification, that the person that is granted the visa gets to have their family with them for the love of God. That they can make life better for their children as well. I mean, after all, that's what it's all about. And we should public policy should always induce family cohesion. I believe that strongly. Families are the keystone of society, and we should always do whatever it takes to preserve them. And fourth, yeah, maybe you're not advantaged to get in front of the line for a path to citizenship that Republicans are resisting, but you're not disadvantaged from getting in line. In other words, the folks who get the visa can get in back of the line. Yes, it's going to take a lot longer. Yes, maybe their children can grow up and become adult age and petition for them. But that's fair, right? That they get legalization and then they get to get in back of the line. They shouldn't be disadvantaged from that either. So we feel that those four components are necessary if we're going to advance a work visa program that I feel would again, allow people to contribute to the economy, get them out of the shadows, have the certainty that they will not be deported, ripped away from their families, and then can achieve their aspirations, not just the employer's aspirations, but their own. That's, I think, a fundamental principle of the American dream.
Mr. Garza, how are you? In the words of Martin Luther King, a bad law is the same as no law. But my question to you is, in The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck, families such as the Joads and the Garzas, would you say that their success has contributed to their ability to unify? And if the government could pull together to unify just as well for people all over to pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that would be the success story. Many of these laws are man-made, and the problems that we encounter are man-made anyway. So to break down that barrier would just be the catalyst for everyone to come on in and be a major factor in how we succeed in life.
Without question. Without question. Look, rindo mis respetos to the Cleveland City Club because of the spirit of what this group is about, which is free expression of ideas. And that free expression of ideas means that I have the humility to respect your perspective. I have the humility to understand that I need you, whether you agree with me or disagree with me, that we are interdependent, that we have an open forum of dialogue with respect and civility, that we're going to listen to each other's ideas on what is going to make our lives better. And so, when you're talking about, the reconciliation, the pragmatism of coming together, yes, that's exactly what our body politic needs right now. It seems like we're distancing ourselves even more instead of coming together. And the kind of narrative that is used by folks at the highest level of electoral politics should concern every one of us. What is going on in our universities should concern us. These safe spaces. Please challenge me. Come at me with your disagreements. And I just, all I ask for is that you show me the respect of listening to the reasons that anchor my ideas. And then maybe we can have a more productive discussion. And of course, I'll listen to yours. But without listening to each other, without having that conversation and that dialogue, I don't think we're going to get anywhere. And that's the danger of safe spaces. Good God. Freedom of expression above all. Freedom of expression above all. Yes.
Daniel, I think you impliedly, if not expressly, have answered the question that I'm about to ask you, but that is, I'm assuming you're for a pathway for citizenship.
I am.
And that the one thing that I think is problematic is this, what's the rejoinder to the notion of line jumping, that effectively that you are rewarding line jumping, because that's something that I've struggled with personally. Now, I happen to think that Ronald Reagan got that right, by the way, from my perspective. I know that's extraordinarily controversial. But I will also interject a political observation that was said after the last election, and that is that the Hispanic giant is awake, it's cranky, and it's taking names.
Yeah, absolutely. So there is a very real divide between the wealth in America and the wealth pretty much anywhere else south of the border. And let me preface what I'm going to say, or entre parentheses, say that I do consider it a cruel irony, and we talked about this, a cruel irony that for hundreds and thousands of years, the Cherokee and the Iroquois and the Navajo and the Seminole, along with the Chichimeca and the Aztec and the Mayan and the Inca and the Borinquen, roamed the Americas freely to improve their lives. And the non-indigenous authorities come and set borders and tell them, don't move from where you're at. And they're the ones, the indigenous, who are primarily tied, to their geographic region. Look, I'm not an open borders guy, but what I'm trying to say is, it is the non-indigenous who get to freely, at leisure or for business, travel wherever they want, whenever they please. And yet, mostly the indigenous cannot do that. And that's cruel to me. Now, having said that, I also understand what a sovereign nation is, and that we must defend and guard our borders from those who would do wrong to our citizens. That is the primary responsibility of government, is to defend from foreign aggression or from individuals who would do us wrong. I understand that. How do we reconcile those two, though, when you have folks who are seeking opportunity and who will make America stronger and better because of their skills and their talents, whether they be basic or specialized? And I think that's where smart people have to come together to find that balance. But we're not seeing that discussion, that dialogue. In fact, we're seeing this, and people, again, trying to score political points and political wins by leveraging at the expense of those folks. And so to answer your question, it is a principle of fairness, right? That folks who have waited and have been patient in line, all of a sudden see 11 million cut in front of them. I understand that. I understand that there's also the reality that we need to get to the business of assimilating 11 million people that ain't gonna go nowhere. They're here to stay. They're part of us. They're part of our society. Their children go to our schools and want to achieve great things in America. And I want them to achieve great things in America. So, which is why we're open to the what I have said about the work visa program that then maybe makes it longer for someone to achieve citizenship, and maybe that allows also the Republicans time to persuade them on their ideas, on the more conservative values that they espouse to, and win them over. Earn the vote of Latinos, for the love of God. Don't just expect it, right? I mean, look. I'll tell you really a quick thing. Colorado is fascinating to me. Colorado, 59% of Latinos in Colorado voted for Barack Obama in 2008. And people were freaking out because, man, but it can't get worse. They said, it got worse, all right. For them, it was 85% of Latinos voted for Barack Obama in 2012. 90% of Latinos voted for Michael Bennet, the candidate for Senate who won, with 90% of the Latino vote. For Republicans, it was dark days in Colorado. Cory Gardner is now the candidate in 2014, Republican, and says, I am going to make a deliberate effort to engage Latinos, to open up my office and hire from their communities, to go to their chamber of commerces, to go to their churches, to go to the universities, and tell Latinos, this is what I'm about. This is what I want to do to give you access to the free market, to make you sure that you're going to have opportunity and a great education. He got 45% of the Latino vote. Look at that. All you got to do is engage. Show up. They're not going to hurt you. That's the bottom line. And so there is, again, this sort of political question hanging over the issue of immigration. But I'm telling you, I think 2014, it changed a lot of things and changed a lot of opinions. It wasn't only Colorado. In Kansas, Brownback and Roberts got over 45%. In Texas, Cornyn and Abbott got about 45% of the Latino vote. In in Georgia, David Perdue and Nathan Deal got about 45% of the Latino vote. Chris Christie got 51% of the Puerto Rican vote. That's a tough nut to crack in the Latino world. And Scott got about 45% in Florida. So across the country, you saw that. A black Republican challenger in San Antonio in District 23, a predominantly Latino district, beat a Latino Democrat incumbent. Think about that. So I mean, the Latino electorate is up for grabs. You just need to engage them. Tell them what you're about. The plans that you have to, and how we are interdependent. So there's a lot of hope, I think, but it takes people to work together and come together and reach consensus before anything else.
Do you think with a greater acceptance of immigration that there will become an overcrowding in America in the future?
So the reason I say market-based is because the visa program should be tied to market forces. If there is a demand for those workers, whether specialized or basic, then that the immigration law absorb for that. Not a quota set, a sort of a arbitrary quota set by a congressman or the Congress or the Senate, but tied to market demand. And also that the visa program be tied to the work visa program be tied to market demand, so that there's always we are accommodating for future flows of immigrants, but tie it to market forces. Now, part of the reason that the Reagan 1986 Immigration Act that gave citizenship to 3 million didn't work was because it didn't accommodate for future flows of immigrants. And so there is no line. There is no line to get on, folks. There are, I believe, 1 million spots that are given to family, mostly family, tied to family, green cards. And then there's a lottery of, I think it's 400,000 or two, I'm not entirely sure, of work visas that green cards that are given if you're lucky. I mean, basically a lottery. I mean, like, I don't know if they do little balls in the thing or whatever, but if you pick, you pick. If not, and so it takes a long time for someone to get a green card if you're not either picked in the lottery, have $1 million to start a company, or or family, married to an American. So it's tough. Right now it's very restricted, but we can be much more flexible, which is why I really liked Ted Cruz's position 2 years ago. He said he wanted to double the size of green cards that were given per year and quadruple the number of work-related visas that were coming into America. Because again, he wanted to respond to market forces, and it's smart to do that. It's good for our economy.
Thank you. Everybody talks about the people that cross the border illegally. No one ever says 40% get a visa and don't return. How much of the problem with the immigration system and gun control and several other laws is not the laws, but the way they're not enforced? And if does anybody want to change a law that's not being enforced to give someone another loophole or another excuse to not to do their job? Thank you.
That's a great question. And one of the toughest things is for a president to reconcile what his sentiment is as opposed to his responsibility, his or her responsibility. And that is the take care clause, that you are there to execute the laws passed by Congress. And you don't get to pick and choose which ones you pass and which ones you don't. The president has been called a deporter-in-chief. And that political pressure that has come from the left and Latino organizations has compelled him to take actions that I think have exceeded his authority. Specifically on the question of DAPA. There is DACA, which is a deferred action program that was set for the children of folks who are here unauthorized through no fault of their own, are going to the schools and wanting to get jobs and cannot because they don't have legal status. The president then advanced DAPA, which said that if you are a child of a DACA kid or a child of kids born in America, then we would look the other way, use prosecutorial discretion. Part of the problem, the reason we actually oppose DAPA, that's a tough one to oppose because I agree that with the president's intent on this one, which is humanitarian, which is lack of resources, and then also the political pressure. They're all legitimate reasons to consider when you're considering executive action. The problem with DAPA is that it actually contradicts current law. And it is supposed to be consonant with the law, where it is hazy or shady. But here, no child can petition for their parent. That is specific in the law. And the president is required to take care of executing the laws and cannot just merely look the other way. Now, I agree that if you don't have the resources to deport 11 million, you focus on the criminals. You focus on those who are going to do more harm to America. But again, when it flies in the face of current law and congressional intent, and it actually doesn't, I'll end this really quick here. DAPA is not merely saying we are going to look the other way. It's actually conferring visas. And possibly, I think there's Obamacare and child tax credits. Those are benefits. Again, that flies in the face of current law. And that's a tough position to take. But we cannot support any law that shreds the Constitution, that shreds the principle of separation of powers, and that ignores the will of Congress. Congress legislates. The president executes the law. He doesn't get to impose legislation on top of Congress. It doesn't work that way. We are not a dictatorship. So I hear what you're saying. There is the rule of law, and regrettably, in this case, the president is compelled to execute that law to the best of his abilities and with the resources that he has, but in consonance with the will of Congress. Thank you.
Today at the City Club, we've been enjoying a Friday Forum with Daniel Garza, Executive Director of the LIBRE Initiative. Our program today is sponsored by Cumberland Real Estate Development. We thank you for your support. Our community partner for today's forum is Global Cleveland. We also welcome the first class of Mandel Scholars from the Jack Joseph and Morton Mandel Humanities Center at Coyote Community College. We thank all of you for your partnership and your attendance. And that brings us to the end of today's forum. Thank you, Mr. Garza. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This forum is now adjourned.
For information on upcoming speakers or for podcasts of the City Club, go to cityclub.org.
Production and distribution of City Club Forums on IdeaStream is made possible by the generous support of PNC and the Raskin Family Fund, with additional funding from Cleveland State University, Robert Conrad, and the Payne Fund.